Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Reptile Rejects. It's Dominic and I today with our guest, Bill Hughes.
Good.
We would first like to say our condolences to Vin Russo and the tragic loss of that collection. So we'd like, and if you can support him in any way and send any money to his GoFundMe, that would be uh, very helpful to rebuild his collection. Uh, But yeah, so today we welcome on Bill Hughes, and but we'll start off with Dominic. What's new with Dominic's collection this week?
Good evening to everyone. What's new with me? I had my last pygmy clutch hatch out. Those little babies are out. Had a total of, from the two clutches, I think 18 eggs. One died in the first week in one clutch. The other one, I had a little bit of a stillborn baby there. But I've got 16 babies going. They're eating strong. They're doing well. And my last clutch in the incubator just started hatching. I got one little super zebra carpet python coming out. So last clutch should be out by the end of the week. So pretty happy about that. Except for that, what else is new? I'm still waiting on my export for my green trees that I've ordered. 5 month late, and was supposed to come last weekend, was supposed to come the weekend before, and now it's delayed another 5 to 6 weeks. So it's back to the waiting board. Except for that, life is good. Animals are good. My kids are good. Life is good. How about you, Michael? What's new?
Awesome. Well, this week I found out that my order is not gonna. I'm not gonna be able to get those Eleuthera boas from Stephen Woodward down in Arizona. Looks like U.S. Fish and Wildlife wants more information than anybody can provide, even though these animals were brought in by the thousands in the 80s and 90s. So that kind of sucks. But I ended up having a nice 40-minute conversation with him on Friday because I had Friday off of work. He happened to call me on Messenger out of nowhere, and I had a great conversation with him. Definitely somebody I'd want to try to get on eventually.
Very nice.
But yeah, no, he
Is it because they're CITES Appendix 2, I'm assuming?
yeah, their CITES too, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife is funny with some
Yeah, they
things.
are. They
So they like Jeff Murray was able to send up the animals I have 10 years ago, or it's like 7 years ago now, yeah, as long with four others, and they were able to get the paperwork for that legally and everything. And this time they wanted more information than we could provide, which is like more than just because he had to prove receipts for buying the animals from Ryan Potts, and they probably wanted like where Ryan got them from and stuff, and that's 15, 20 years ago, so people don't always keep that paperwork around. So yeah, kind of sucks, but at least I'll move forward and maybe looking to import some stuff from Germany, possibly a line that I have, but I only have males of that line. So hopefully I can do that in the future. But for now, I'm pretty content, honestly. So yeah, kind of sucks, but
I was gonna say
we'll have to move on.
Europe is definitely key. Like anything that's from the States, you're not going to get it if it's on CITES. But from Europe, any Australian animals I can move in from Europe to here. I've had zero issues. As far as I know, nothing's coming from the States for like 7 or 8 years. I don't know anyone in Canada that's successfully done it.
Yeah, well, even yeah, it's hard to say because these are from Bahamas, but I think the Bahamas also maybe put a thing out there to be a little harder on stuff going in and out, even though it's a brown and gray snake that most people don't care about, other than the select few of us. So it's kind of funny in that way. But yeah, well, at least Germany will probably have them, and the paperwork would be approved in a matter of weeks instead of waiting months to hear back nothing. So yeah. Other than that, I think the Kentucky Pine should be out soon. Oh yeah, there was a great episode this week on Colubrid and Colubroid on the story of the Kentucky Pines by Phil Peak, which is one that I've read in the comments section of many Pituophis Facebook groups
Ah,
on the story of collecting the three animals that are in the hobby and whatnot, and it was really cool to hear it out loud from the man himself. So yeah, that was a super cool episode, and everybody should go and watch that because that was definitely a wealth of information.
I've seen it pop up on my feed, but I haven't found the time yet to watch it. Anything
Oh,
else?
there's a
Let's go.
there's a couple of interesting stories in
Oh,
there.
really?
Uh, Not really. Went through, did a couple deep cleans on some cages. Nothing much. I think we had. Oh, I turned after talking to Steve Woodward. I ended up cranking the heat up a little bit on my Bahama to try to avoid any abnormities. Because it sounds like Steve uses heat tape, even though Jeff suggested not using heat tape and using lights or heat panel. But Steve also mentioned to keep the higher hotspot on them in like the low 90s to cook the babies a bit better. So I just adjusted the heat panel so that that's most of the day it'll be give a 90-degree hotspot in a certain part, even though I have it set to like 85, just because of how the room is and whatnot. I have to adjust for that. Like in the winter, I can set that probe to 77 where it is, and it'll get the hotspot to like 85, which is more than enough that time of year. So bit of a not a plug and play like most new keepers would think. You gotta play with things sometimes to really dial stuff in.
Totally get it. Totally get it. So, before we introduce Bill on, do you want to tell me a bit about what do you know of Bill before we bring him on?
So I remember when I first started listening to podcasts back in 2018, 2019. I think I probably ran across Bill's original NPR episode from 10 years ago now and just found it fascinating hearing about the Sanzinia and all that cool and the tree boas and stuff that you don't, even on NPR, you didn't hear too much of those species on back then, other than maybe the one Jeff Murray episode the same year. But yeah, it was that. And then I know Bill's also done a bit of field work with Centicollis and Baja rat snakes and played around with stuff like that. So yeah, he's not just a keeper; he's a field herper as well.
Very nice. So you ready to bring him on? Bill, how are you doing, man? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, wait, I'll unmute him.
I don't even know how I did
There we
that.
go.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. We are glad to have you on.
Very happy.
You guys are gonna have to dictate the format for me, and I'll just play along.
Sounds good. So I think some people may have listened to your other podcast, but maybe give us like a brief summary of how you got into the hobby, and then maybe include what you're currently working with in the hobby.
Sure. So like I told you in our little preamble pre-meeting, I'm 66, and I think the first I grew up in Southern California and on the East Coast, kind of back and forth, but I started breeding local Southern California stuff back when I was in junior high. So that would be like the early 70s. And then I had the luxury of living in the next town over to Western Zoological Supply, which was the big importer on the West Coast back in the day. And we literally used to sell them feeder lizards for 25 cents a piece. And they would give us store credit towards like Burmese pythons. And so I was like in junior high at the time. We'd go out and noose Scaloporus and Udas and bring them to them in tubs, and they would give us store credit. And you build up enough money. I think we paid $50 a piece for baby Burmese pythons, back then. And when you're 8th or 9th grade, that was a ton of money. But I actually bred Burmese pythons in the late 70s. Had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't even thought about that till just now, but it's just been, something I've always just been, yeah, that's Billy, my crazy little brother who likes snakes, or that's my neighbor who keeps snakes in the garage. And then, it has never left me. And then I just have worked with a ton of stuff over the years, but I just kind of gravitated towards the obscure or difficult to breed in captivity. Has always been a challenge to me. Like, how could I figure this out? Way back in the day, I bred the Calabar's pythons. And I think there were only one or two of us who did it at the time. And there was no information on these things. They were imported adults. I had a trio. And it was in our old house in Vegas. And my reptile room we had a 3-car garage. And I just had this single car park walled in. And that was my snake room, because there's always been a rule in this house, in this marriage, no snakes in the house. So that was as close. Actually, right now my iPad is sitting on my homemade incubator with Baja rat snakes and mountain king snakes in it, but that puts the iPad at eye level. So that's one concession my wife has granted me. I can incubate the snakes in the house. But the calibars, I could find no information, so I just started reading up on ball pythons, because they're kind of like on the fringe of the forest, where the forest meets the savanna. That's what I determined to be their habitat. So I just left them in my garage in Vegas. They spent all summer in just bone dry orchid bark with a water bowl, and it would get up to 87, 88 degrees in there. And I walked by the cage one day, had a screen top. It was just like a 40-gallon long aquarium. It wasn't anything real scientific. And I had a pitcher of water in my hand to go water some plants. And I literally just dumped half of the pitcher in the cage like a monsoon storm had hit. And they were locked up within 30 minutes. And they're really crazy snakes, because they're kind of a species that's in between live bearing and egg laying, because they carry the eggs for a super long time. The eggs are enormous compared to the size. You got a snake that's the size of a big rosy boa, and they have 3 or 4 giant eggs. But I'm digging deep in my memory, and someone who's listening to this will probably correct me, but the incubation was only like 35 days. So basically, by the time they lay the eggs, they're all pretty much halfway developed, if not more. And they have these giant babies that are big enough to eat fuzzy mice right out of the egg. So that was kind of a cool thing. And I know we're going to gravitate towards Sanzinia. And, I bought my first Sanzinia off kingsnake.com back in the day. And I was so broke, I bought my first trio of Westerns on a payment plan. My kids were younger. I didn't have a whole lot of disposable income. And and then the same thing. It was the challenge of just trying to figure out, in my mind, in my opinion, breeding snakes successfully is all about replicating the right triggers. It's what triggers them to switch into reproduction mode, whether that's light cycles, temperature cycles, wet and dry seasons, all those different things. That's always been the thing that attracts me the most about working with a group of reptiles. Is just, and it's the same thing for field herping. And they're very similar pursuits. When's the right time to go? The right application, the right approach. Are you, and all the second guessing that comes with it that eats your butt. Are you doing it at the right time, and all these things. So it's always been, I've just been lucky that I like obscure stuff that, especially with the Sanzinia, when I first started keeping them, no one really wanted them. There was no great demand for anything Sanzinia. I just had them because I like them. Everything I've worked with has never been for monetary purposes. I'm sure I've lost my ass over all these years, but it's just because they're cool. And Sanzinia just happened to be very, very easy to take care of. It's just the only thing difficult about Sanzinia is getting successful litters. That is, every year is a challenge. Every year they present. You're always questioning yourself. You're always, I just had one slug out a couple weeks back, a Western, and it's like, well, hell, I just lost 2 years because I can't breed her again next year. I won't breed her again until the year after this. But there's nothing you can do. And you can just fall into that quick pit of despair where you just want to say F this and walk away from it all. And then, you just got to move on to the next thing. And it's kind of nice having these colubrids, which are kind of a refound passion of mine, because, now I've got, baby Zonata on the ground that I have to get, feeding. And I've got Baja snakes and more Zonata fixing to hatch pretty soon. And so it's nice to have something else while you're waiting on your boas to drop, because Sanzinia have a 6-month gestation roughly. It's a long time, and there's a lot of doubt that can creep in. My friends will tell you that I'm ADHD combined with OCD at any given moment, and they're very patient with me, because even though I've been doing this forever, I'm still full of doubt. I'm still searching for questions. I'm still asking questions, searching for answers, I should say. And there's a lot of guys out there that, quite frankly, do it a lot better than me, and I'm willing to learn. I am totally willing to adopt. I'm not too proud. if there's something I can do to tweak my methods, I'm all for it. I really am. Because, when you're dealing with animals that aren't quite as popular in the culture, it's kind of a fraternity. You get to know the guys pretty well, and there's a lot of give and take of information, and sometimes there's give and take in genetics, which is really important with a poorly represented species like Sanzinia, that everybody's successful and everybody wins. They're never going to be as common as ball pythons. I've put a lot of animals out into the market over the years. A lot of my friends, Keith McPeak, Paul Mitzelfeld, Doug Taylor, Jeff Murray's produced a lot of animals too. And a lot of these guys are way below the radar compared to me. I just like having fun like this. I'm not the most gregarious guy in the world, but you get me talking about snakes, and my wife will just get up from the table and walk away because she knows it's a lost cause, And I'm very fortunate because her philosophy about my reptile affliction is I don't get it, but it makes him happy, so I understand it, and that's all I can ask for. And but yeah, there's a lot of guys out there that have probably produced a lot more than me that I'm always bouncing ideas off them, or what do you think, kind of thing. And I think, Michael, I sent you pictures of that Eastern Sanzinia from the other day. I mean, this thing is rewriting the whole book of what I thought I knew. She's done nothing that would indicate my old checklist of this snake took. This snake is gravid, except for not eating. And I can go through that list.
So did you want to, could you go through what's maybe changed, like your old philosophy versus what you've learned now with the Sanzinia breeding?
Let me put a corollary on that. If I start to ramble, if I start to divert, pull me back in.
Oh no, we'll let you talk. We'll let you talk. That's for sure.
I can roam and forget what the heck I was talking about in a second.
That's all right. That makes for usually the best conversations.
So my overall method of breeding Sanzinia, and I'll just tell you, a lot of it is Mother Nature driven. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. You have to have, excuse me, for them, they have to have a long, dark, progressively colder winter. And what I do is I move them into I have outbuildings for my snakes. One is primarily just a dry goods storage building. Has no heat or air in it. And once the high temps here in Vegas are safe, I'll move all the Sanzinia stacks into that building. And what I want to end them over time is to get them to where, and this is where I get too far ahead of myself. I manipulate temperatures along with a decreasing day. As my days get shorter, their temperatures drop. Ultimately, I want them to get in for the nighttime lows to be in the mid to low 50s for a good 90 days, as long as I can keep them there. Now they have a basking shelf underneath the radiant heat panel to which they can get, and I will drop that peak temperature too down to as low as 70, and I'll also drop how long it's actually on. So they have the choice as to whether or not they want to get warmer. They're just not going to get really, really hot at all. And I've never had an upper respiratory issue ever with them. And they're sitting, I've had them copulating in the water bowl at 56 degrees.
Just by curiosity, do you do that during the day as well? Or is that just nighttime temps?
Well, the
lowering the temps.
The days are whatever they are. Whatever the building gets naturally. Like I said, I have no ancillary heating. I do have a space heater in there, but that's just set at 50 degrees. So if for some reason the building itself were to dip below 50, it would come on and keep the. But really, my problem the last few years has been, theoretically, I don't know. Again, the second guessing comes into play. So back to, I start moving animals in October, and typically don't start pairings until Thanksgiving, somewhere around there. And Sanzinia will breed whenever. They breed for fun. So just because you get a lock means absolutely nothing. It literally means nothing. This last one, I'll circle back to this one that I'm contending with now that I referenced at the beginning of this subject is, I pair them and I keep the males in with the female until I see a good lock. Then I'll pull him after for 3 or 4 days, or if I see no activity for 3 or 4 days. I have found, even when I bred barneck scrubs back in the day, that I feel, this is just, again, these are just my opinions. These are not anything set in stone. I'm authority on nothing. But I have found that there's renewed ardor from the male. It seems like they get complacent when they're with the female 24/7. So I have found if you pull them and then put them back in after 4 days, they react like they've never seen her before. Plus, I'm semi-retired now, but my career, I traveled every week, 3 to 4 days, 3 to 4 nights every week, week in, week out. So I miss a lot of the action that's going on. I'm not there. I've only seen one Sanzinia ovulation. I've just never been around. Now I'm home. So that's a whole new set of OCD things I can contend with now because I have the time to pay attention. I think I was better off in the days when I was just kind of running to catch up with career and young kids. And everybody's grown now. And like I said, I'm pretty much retired. So I have the time to think. And sometimes that might be more dangerous or more detrimental than it is beneficial because you can overthink things. But anyhow, so I get the snakes into that long, cold period. I pair them. Again, it just depends on Mother Nature in Las Vegas. When daytime temps are starting to creep up in that building into the 80s, the big discussion has always been, because I've been able to palpate ovum, or follicles, if you will, late into, like the one that's gravid now, she had follicles as late as April. The big question is, at what temperatures do the males no longer produce viable semen? I don't know. It's just one of those mind-blowing things that you can go down that rabbit hole. And I think the key is to pair them as long as they copulate, and don't close the window that still might be open because you think they might be done, and as I'm saying this to you guys now, I'm saying it to myself again. You only get one shot a year, and if you blow it, and they like the Western that's slugged out, she's done for next year. I can't breed her next year just because she slugged out, it was still hard on her body. And I think most guys, the times I've heard, again, this is anecdotal, guys that have tried to, and maybe it's been done, but I don't know of it, that have tried to breed back to back, it has not gone well. Either the female dies or you get slugs, and then you're back in the same place you were had you just started feeding her again and let her rehab, let her get her health back. So it's just I think keeping them cold as long as you can. The guys that have had really, really good success, Keith McPeak for one, Doug Taylor up in the Pacific Northwest, they have the luxury of longer, colder winters than I do. And I don't even know if I could get an air conditioner to get them down to the 50s, but it would cost a fortune just, for 4 or 5 months. So I'm pretty much relegated to what Mother Nature lets me do. And I think that one Eastern I have now is gravid. Oh, so we'll go back to, I guess, after you're done. Other thing I do, I'm a big proponent of combating the males. Always chaperone it. It's always been a sumo wrestling match. I've never seen one bite, but they really, really constrict each other. You've seen the crotalus combats in the wild when they intertwine. They do it not violently, but stridently, if you will. And they are, I would worry about them breaking each other's ribs.
Is your goal to separate them pretty much midway so that you have no clear winners,
yes,
and then put both the males in each the cages? Yeah. Okay.
I put 2 males in with the female, and the pheromone production must be off the charts because the female goes berserk too. She's racing around the cage while I have great videos of it. They have fallen out the males have fallen out on the cage floor, on the building floor, and continue to wrestle, and they're audible. Like an angry lizard. I've never heard that they're hissing and they're grunting. It's something to see, but I think a little competition. I know from field herping in the spring here in the desert, if you're hiking a draw or something and you find a big female atrox, Western diamondback, underneath the creosote bush, if you walk concentric circles away from that bush, I can almost guarantee you at least 60% of the time you'll find one, if not more, males hanging out. They're just hanging out somewhere in the shade, waiting for that signal to breed. So I think healthy competition can't hurt, especially if you don't allow the animals to hurt themselves. Like I said, I pack a lunch when I'm going to do it and go out there and sit in a chair, and I wait about 20, 25 minutes till things are really getting heated, and I decide who the winner is and pull them out. And I don't, that's what they would do in the wild, so I try to replicate as much as I can. Anything I can do to improve my odds. That's pretty much it, really.
And how about, would you ever put a male to multiple females, or it's one male or two males?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have out of necessity in the past. I don't know. There's always that how far can a male be spread? How much semen do they produce? There's always that, is he shooting blanks when you put him in with another female kind of thing. But and there's definitely a compatibility issue. This female that's gravid now, this is my third season trying to breed her. The first 2 seasons, 3 males, no reaction whatsoever. To the point where, had I not known any better, I would have thought she was a male. I mean, they didn't react aggressively as if she was a male or aggressively as if she was a female. They were just on opposite ends of the cage. So I thought I was done this season. No one bred her. I was like, well, crap. And I was moving them back into the main building in April and palpated her, and she had like 9 big follicles. I'm like, what the hell? So of course I get on my hotline to my Sanzinia friends, and they told me the obvious: put a male back in with her. I would have done that anyhow, but sometimes you just need to have your own suspicions validated by someone whose opinion you respect. And these are guys whose opinions I respect. So they validated the obvious. So I did. And I sent you those pictures, Michael. I wish I could put them up. But, the thing is, when you take them back into the main building and you're warming them up and you got your fingers crossed and you hope that they took, normally you have an ovulation. Like I said, I've only seen one because I'm never home until this year. And I did get a picture of ovulating, but normally their post-ovulation shed, they will emerge 5 times darker than they were when they went in. They have a color change, which I would assume is to assist them in baking the babies in the sun. The darker they are, the more the sun's rays are going to absorb. She didn't. But typically they'll shed out. My other female Eastern, last time she dropped a litter, was almost coal black. I mean, there was almost no green left. And you can't go by the off-feed markers either, because I've had some animals that feed the entire way through. The one I have now has not fed since March. I've had animals that fed through one gestation, and the same animal 2 years later did not. So it's a variable, but it's something that you can tick off the list as a hopeful sign. And so you have the shedding out dark, going off feed, and then hopefully you see an ovulation or just, the mid-body swelling that tells you the follicles are developing. The one I have right now did not shed out dark. She's darker than she was, but she's not coal black. You can still see the green. The white is still quite prominent. So the only thing I was hanging my hat on is, well, she's not eating. And, a snake that hasn't fed since March should be thin. And she's not thin. She's super distended. But the new wrinkle she's added to this kitty of Sanzinia knowledge is she roams. She's restless all the time. I've never had one do this before. She may bask for an hour or two up on the basking shelf. I have the basking shelf set at 85. The rest of the building I keep the whole building around 80, 79, 80 degrees. And she just roams. And it's the weirdest thing. I've never had one do this before. Just so happens my buddy Paul Mitzelfeld has a Western that's manifesting the exact same behaviors. And it seems counterintuitive to me that a pregnant snake would roam constantly, thereby theoretically making itself more vulnerable to predation. You would think that a pregnant snake would hunker down somewhere and minimize its exposure to predators. But this thing is she's just uncomfortable. She's gotten so big that I think she just can't get comfortable. But one thing also is that the ones that fast will typically resume feeding 1 to 2 weeks before they drop. And I had a dear friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, named Rick Staub, who was just a font of wisdom and just a good human being. Back in the day, my first litter, Sanzinia, I said, well, she just ate. Maybe she's not pregnant. It was like 20-some years ago. And he said, well, that'll happen. A lot of times, boas especially, once the baby's moved towards the vent and that pressure on the digestive tract is released, all of a sudden they realize, shit, I'm hungry. And that has proven true. So every time I go out there now, even though she's probably not due for at least another 30 days, I still offer her food. And no reaction whatsoever. The Western that dropped slugs for me took a small rat 2 days before she dropped the slugs. So the same thing, she had been fasting since March. What was obviously slugs moved off the digestive tract towards the vent for birth. She was hungry. So I'm hoping that this one will follow the same path and that I can, one of these days she's going to take a rat and then I can just sit back and wait. I have not had good success the last 3 years. I just haven't. And
do you think animals that have slugs will go, like they'll dump them like a month or two earlier than they probably should?
She did.
Or have you noticed any difference?
She definitely did. Yeah, she definitely did. I have another gravid Western that is textbook symptomatic, except she's feeding. But everything else seems to be going according to schedule. And if this one dropped those slugs probably 60 days before a viable litter would have dropped, I would think. Big pile of slugs. And it's just one of those, got a nasty sticky stuff to clean up and hose down the snake because they like to get all up in that stuff and it's like glue. So, they're not you can't take it for granted with them. You just, the care of them, they require no special care whatsoever. I mean, my holdbacks, I've got a pair of Easterns, and I acquired a really, really unique pewter colored Western morph, if you will. I hate that word, but it's different. And I just keep them at room temperature. I mean, they eat and eat and eat, and they don't need anything special. And the babies, I produced, I think 60, 65 Sanzinia over the years. Every one of them ate by day 5 on a live hopper. Pinkies and fuzzies don't have enough heat signature for them to react. If you set them up in a small tub with a snug hide, and because they shed 30 minutes after they're born, or they shed while they're being born. And if you put a live hopper in that, and it walks in front of that snug hide, they're going to take it. And they're super easy to start. By and large, they're really, really docile animals. But I have a couple that are quite angry. But the biggest issues are figuring out, am I doing the right thing to get them to breed? Well, to get viable litters. Getting them to breed, like I said before earlier, is really simple. It means nothing. It means nothing. I wish everything was a king snake. But then again, I guess if they were that easy, they wouldn't be so iconic. And
yeah, for sure.
You guys were talking about sighting
Even
up in Canada and stuff. I have a really good friend, couple, Carrie and Heather in Scotland, and they're super successful with Sanzinia, and they can barely give them away. I mean, their rules and regulations are so tight in the UK as it is. I think they have to tag all their production. They have to have like a...
oh yeah, CITES 1 in the UK has to pit tag every CITES 1 animal.
Yes. And I think he's, he has to wholesale them for next to nothing. I mean, for less than what we get for a Cal King here. It's crazy. But, they're shutting down all the animal shows there, all the vendor type shows. Their version of PETA is quite strong. We were just talking about it again this morning. And their avenues to be able to even market animals are shrinking because the PETA / Humane Society equivalent in the UK is very powerful, evidently. And most of the shows are being closed down, which is a real shame. So guys like them were stuck with, fantastic animals that would be a blessing to the gene pool of the United States. You can't even send a shed. You can't even send a shed skin legally into the U.S.
Yeah,
I know
I believe.
it's been done. I don't know by whom, but I think there have been one or two successful importations of captive bred Sanzinia within the last decade, but I don't know the particulars.
I think you would have. I think if you did do that, you'd have to do it yourself. Like you would have to get the seller to also send them to you, and you'd have to both fill out separate paperwork. And then I believe you would have to either keep 1 or 2 generations and breed those, and then you'd be able to legally sell them or something. It's definitely a big hassle, even if you were to import CITES 1 animals.
And from what I understand, that the final arbiter of all things imported like that into the U.S. is the U.S. Fish and Game. And I may be wrong, but it can even come down to what kind of mood the guy is in when the animals cross his desk, whether or not he approves it or not. It can be that mundane, that all that work and all that effort and all the legalities and hoops that you have to jump through to get to that point can be squashed just on a whim. And I know some very, very smart people who have really, really researched it. I mean, obviously there's a lot of monetary motivation to be able to do so, but genetically it would just, blow the doors open because all these animals are from grandfathered animals from the 70s. And at some point there's never been a registry or an AKC type dog thing, but at some point I don't really believe too much in the deleterious effects of inbreeding in reptiles. I think it takes a long time before aberrancies are manifested, but it's an eventuality. The only saving thing that worries me annually is how many of these animals have died from old age having never been bred because we couldn't figure them out. Even if, like I said at the beginning of this, even if you have a pretty good confidence level and that you're doing everything within your ability that you think to be right, it's still, at best 50-50. For me, anyhow. Other guys may have had much better success over the years, and I'm happy for them. I just keep plugging away.
What size cages do you like to keep your adults in versus raising your juveniles in?
Yeah,
They look like pretty decent sized cages when you sent the picture.
Yeah, they're 4 by 3 by 3 for the adults, and they're not a really mobile snake. They're called tree boas, but the older they get, the less and less arboreal they are. They're very arboreal, maybe to age 4, I would say, just rough guessing. But when you see a big female Western Sanzinia, she's not spending a whole lot of time up in the trees. They're just too big. I mean, I've got some females that are over 6 feet long and as big around as your thigh or your calf, and they eat large rats. Doesn't even leave a bulge, so they're not spinning up. They're on the ground or just right off the ground for sure. And the babies I just keep in appropriately sized Rubbermaid tubs, to give with some branches, some things to, and always have a damp hide. I always give all my animals, even the desert animals, choices. I give them big enough cages in which they have choices, and I let them decide and tell me what it is they prefer. So everybody has a damp hide. Everyone has a dry hide. I'll have damp and dry hides over the heat tape, if that's what I'm using, and damp and dry hides on the cool end of the tub or the cage, and just to give them options and let them decide what they want. And then if they're all using that particular combination, I give them more of it. And the other thing I'm a big proponent of is the cage has to be big enough to give them ranges and temperatures. Again, letting them choose what temperature it is they need. There are temperatures for just hanging out. There are obviously temperature triggers for breeding, but there are also a particular set of temperatures for proper digestion, which is something that I think that is overlooked by a lot of us. And it's taken me a long time to come to that category is, where do they want to go when they're digesting? What temperature do they want to be when they're digesting? And, I think sometimes improper digestion temperatures can lead to regurg issues. And if you give the animal the choice, it will find what it needs. And then once you get to that point, just leave them alone. I'm a practitioner of benign neglect. I set them up, I observe them, I see what it is they want, and if, in my conclusion, all is well, I don't go into the cages. I don't handle my snakes. Half my collection, we can go into the Corrales Ruschenbergeri if you want to at some point, but even the docile stuff, I don't hold them. Oh, there it is. Yeah. What do you think, guys? You think she looks rabid?
Yeah, I would say she's pretty distended there.
But as you can see, you can still see the greenish on her, and the white is still quite white.
Yeah, it's a beautiful animal. So, Bill, something I'm curious about, since you've been doing this for so long. So I started keeping in the 90s, late 90s, and the cage setups have changed so much from the 90s to now. So there's two things I'd love for you to talk about is how you kept them in the 70s compared to how you kept them now, more cage setup. And the second thing is at first you started talking about the Calabar pythons. What were you incubating the Calabar pythons in the 70s? I'm really curious because I know how it was done in the 90s, in the 70s.
I didn't breed the Calabars in the 70s. I bred those. I bred those. That was at our old house, so that would have been, maybe 15, 20 years ago. So, gosh, I want to say I incubated them probably around 84 degrees.
Okay, but I mean, what was the setup? Was it like if you're talking about 20 years ago, you probably still had just a regular incubator, right?
Hovabator.
Okay.
Hovabator.
I've done the whole hovabator. I would cut out the whole bottom of the hovabators, use a gigantic different styrofoam box, lift it up to be able to fit just the top of the hovabator. That was one of the older incubators I had. I was just wondering, before that, I did the aquarium heaters inside the water to be able to do that. But I'm wondering, because you started 20 years before me, I'd love to know 70s, what was done then.
In the 70s, I used my mom's heat pad that she put on our leg when we got God, this is like 1975. Just a plug-in heat pad with it had a dial on it, and I just took like a thermometer that your mom would use to put under your tongue, and I would put the thermometer on the pad, and it took like a day, and try to calibrate it to get to like 84, and then I would just put it on the underneath the recessed part of a 10-gallon aquarium. They got that inset like about a half an inch, if you will. I'm sure it was a fire hazard to hell. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, and just I went to Western Zoological Supply and asked, it was Jim and Barney were the guys that ran the place. What do I do? What do I do? And on my little Stingray bicycle riding, 5 miles to the shop. And, I do remember having to have two neighbors' kids help me get the female off the eggs. Had no clue, no help. I mean, I used to go to this Southern California Reptile Association. It was like a herping club, kind of thing. And absolutely, I think she laid like 19 eggs and I hatched 14. No idea what I was doing. None. The ones on the end got moldy. I, would dust off the mold with a Q-tip, and tried to save the eggs, and probably threw out some eggs too early, thinking they were bad. And they're, in hindsight now, I've had stuff out of way rougher looking eggs than what those were. But that, those, I'm dating myself now, but those were those are the learning years. We didn't have social media. I couldn't reach out to guys like you or my network of people. What do you think? And people don't realize how marvelous this is for the hobby. To be able to have all this information at your disposal, and you can take the good and discard the bad, or you can choose to utilize advice, or if it's not the way you're thinking, you don't have to. But at least you're lucky to find a great field guide, much less go online and find care sheets. Now, I remember I was breeding mangrove snakes just because they also had a reputation, just like 15 years ago, of being difficult to breed. So I wanted to try it. So I acquired a bunch of imports and got them cleaned up, and I was able to breed them pretty good. But I realized that there was no information on Boiga per se at that time. And I realized that, I could write a care sheet on purpose that was totally erroneous and put it out there. And there would be someone who would quote it as Bible 6 months later. You have to be careful, what you read. But I have reams of care sheets and studies and, papers, anything that might help me advance my affliction, to get better. I certainly don't have, I say I'm benign neglect, but at the same time I'm OCD, which is a really awkward place to be because I'll get fixated on something. Right now I've decided that all my Zonata, all the Cow Mountain Kings I need, I've got them spread out around the building. I want everything now in stacks, columns, where I've got columns of greenhorn animals right here. I've got columns of Laguna animals, so I know what's what, where they are, and I try to do a better job of keeping, feeding records. I don't keep shed records. I have too many animals for that now. But just to keep things straight, I strive to be organized, but the ADHD side of me I have a hard time walking in a straight line. So it's a constant battle. And I am at the point in my career, if you will, where I'm not going to keep anything back anymore. No holdbacks at going further. I don't want to add. I'm not taking on any new projects. What I have is what I have, and it's enough. And the corral, the Ruschenberg's tree boas is a long, complicated journey that has really get started off the ground. And we can talk about that a little bit if you want to, but it's been.
Oh yeah, let's. I was gonna say Zonata, but if you're gonna talk about Ruschies, we can definitely talk about Ruschies and maybe even annulateds if you still keep those.
I don't. No.
Oh, okay.
They were imports and they did not fare well. And the ones that are still alive are at a friend's house. I wanted them out. They had gurging issues, and they're subadults now, and they're still taking like hopper mice is all they can handle. So I had a good friend nearby who was willing to take them on. So I said, here, you can have them, and if you can pull them through and you get some babies down the road, we'll talk. But I didn't want the risk of jeopardizing what I already had established.
So those just stayed in quarantine for you, and then they had the regurg, so you just got rid of them before they even touched your main.
Yep.
Okay.
They were in the dry goods building. That's where everything. I have to be careful about if I acquire something new like that. It's got to be at the right time of the year because I'm not going to put them in the general population to acclimate. And so the Ruschenbergs is a really interesting story. I was approached by an importer out of Florida, and he knew I was a big corralist, and he got this big group of Ruschenbergeri, and he said, "Are you interested?" I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm interested." So I got a group of adults, and 4 adults and 1 subadult female. One of the females ended up came in gravid, and gave me 19 babies. I sold 1 pair to a friend. I parked a pair with another friend. I have the rest of them. I'm bringing them up because they look nothing like anything anyone's ever seen before. And been a lot of conjecture. Maybe the female was bred by a hortulana's while being held at the exporter's facility, and that's how she came to be gravid. The colors are. I wish I could have the technology to show you progress pictures. There's no doubt that some of them look just like garden-faced hortulanas. No, It's undeniable. But no one knows what they're going to look like when they're adults. I took the same female 2 years ago, bred her to an undeniably full-blood Russian if you will. And all I got was 5 stillborns, sadly. But all 5 of those stillborns looked just like the ones from the litter she dropped as a wild-caught animal. So, asking me to defend an indefensible position, I'm not sure what they are either way. The babies. I can't, short of having someone take a control group of hortulanas and a control group of known Russian. These are from the mainland of Venezuela. These are not to be confused with the Trinidad and Tobago animals, which are clearly different. And they're also very clearly different than the Russian in Costa Rica. But unless someone were to do a DNA analysis, and even then, I just think that the countries they come from, their range is so vast, there's no doubt there is subspecies overlap. It also calls into question as to the veracity of them even being subspecies at all, because we just don't know.
Bill?
You're talking about, yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but is there any way that when you say the different names, you can give me the common name? I'm not a boa guy, so a lot of the names you're like I'm trying to follow, but certain names I just don't know. So just dumb it down for the people like me that are not boa guys.
It's funny because I'm making a hypocrite of myself because I'm not a Latin name guy.
No, that's okay, and I love it. I just don't know these ones. I'm good into pythons. Okay. The boas, it's not mine, but keep going with your story. I love it.
Fair enough. So what you have is Amazon tree boas, Corallus hortulanas, all over the place. They're imported in huge numbers every year, and people are doing incredible things with them. Then you have Corallus ruschenbergeri, which is, I guess, the most commonly used English name would be mangrove tree boa. And basically, they are a subspecies. They're found in mainland South America, Venezuela, Ecuador, probably Guyana and Suriname, and in which there overlap with that's the proven male that I bred the gravid female to, that came to me gravid. That's probably the prettiest snake I have in the building for sure.
Yeah, that one's stellar. And these are big snakes, right?
They
like
are.
They are almost like a scrub python size.
Correct. They are absolutely identical to scrubs in size and temperament. These are the meanest snakes I've ever kept. 3 years later, they still want to kill me. When I go in there to change the water bowls, I go to the back of the room and work my way out. So when I'm done, I shut the door and walk out. Or they'll break their face striking at the glass repeatedly. And this is almost 3 years later. The babies are not that bad. They're not ever to be confused with a ball python. But that's one of the babies. I mean,
So is this one of the from that? I didn't go far enough back in your Facebook to find the hortulanas possible cross ones, but
yes, theoretically, yes. I'm not sure. I can't say what they are, and I don't think anyone else can either. That's the bottom line. Like I said,
yeah, they could even be just a natural intergrade.
It's an indefensible position for me. So I said, you know what? Screw it then. I'll just keep them. And I had a good friend say, Bill, this complex of animals is known to go through many color changes from birth to maturity. And a buddy said, if you can, you probably should keep them all because you have no idea what they're going to look like as adults. And just in the 3 years since they were born, the changes they're unrecognizable for when they were babies. So I have the room. I can afford to feed them. So I'm just going to ride it out and see what happens. And then I will repair this year the same pair that gave me the stillborns to see what happens. Then I have another younger female coming up that will be ready to breed with just a spectacular, a different male that is also undeniably a Ruschenbergeri, and see what happens. I think it's just really boils down to, how do I say this? There's not a whole lot to make comparisons to. There's just not enough. I mean, this wave of Ruschenbergeri that came in, it was a short window opening. And I know one guy in Florida got a few and he produced some babies, and which look completely different than mine. But I've seen pictures of litters in Europe from validated Ruschenbergeri that are as varied as my litter. So it's like no one really knows yet because they haven't been in the population long enough to figure it out. We don't know what the end game is or what the, I'm trying to think of the right term. We don't know the variables yet. We just don't know.
Yeah, or the natural variation that from regions that they maybe took one animal from some valley that has some totally different phenotypes on it or something,
Well,
right?
I may...
Like, it could be the same with annulateds, right? Like, we got the orange and the brown annulateds,
Well,
but maybe in some other valley there's something else.
Well, and here's the other thing that I find to be a real quandary is if you look at a map, you have Costa Rica to the north, way to the north. And you have Ruschenbergeri in Costa Rica and a little bit into Panama. We have a home off the coast of Panama, and I've herped along that Costa Rican-Panama border quite a bit, going up into Limon, Costa Rica, and that's when you get into the annulators. But anyhow, so you have Ruschenbergs in that part of the world. Then you have Hortulanus all the way down, about halfway. I'm just spitballing. I don't have a map in front of me. Let's say halfway into Venezuela. And then you have Ruschenbergeri again. Makes no sense to me. I think taxonomically, that whole group needs a lot of work. And this is just some dummy from Las Vegas saying so. I just, it's so unexplored and really so unpursued in the hobby that we just don't have enough. Our sample set is just far too small to make any definitive determinations at this point.
Yeah. I think Dr. Booth is the only guy working with the Trinidad stuff. And it almost sounded like the Tobago stuff is like even different than it's just the Trinidad stuff.
Him and Jeff Murray, did a painstakingly difficult, legal importation. They went through all the, I don't even know what those hoops and, but they were able to get it done. And they're fantastic animals, but they are different too because by and large, most of the ones from Trinidad are patternless. Most of Warren's animals end up as adults. They're gorgeous, but they're patternless. But then you go over to Tobago, and all of a sudden you've got animals that look like the one you just posted the picture of, like my male. So, like I said, I think the sample size is just too small for anyone to make a hard and fast decision. I liken it to, you guys are in Canada, but the famous line of locality California king snakes called scissors crossing Cal Kings. And they're identified, they just have one white stripe down their dorsal. Okay? So my analogy being, if everybody only bred scissors crossing Cal Kings and you came across a regular banded Cal King, it would freak you out because it wouldn't be the norm that you're acclimated to. It'd be outside of the sample size that you're used to. And maybe that's too general of an analogy, but bottom line is they're different, they're cool, and I like them. And I never got into this to make any money. I'm just willing to ride these things out and see what happens, F2, F3, F4 down the road. Be a fun retirement project.
For sure. Do you want to go into how you have the adult set up and kind of your game plan for trying to successfully reproduce them? Like, are you going to go at it from like a normal Hortulanus or Amazon tree boa route, or are you going to vary it a little bit?
No, what I'll do is I'll keep them in the main building because they don't need to get nearly as cold, obviously. For Corrales, I'll let them dip into the high 60s for my, either call it a peak or a trough. For when I'm cycling them down, again, it's longer, cooler nights followed by shorter, warmer days, but less warm than a month ago, if you will, and just gradually step it down toward the warm up. And then I'll also, unlike Sanzinia, I will mist heavily. I don't mist much. The building stays very humid. My building stays around 60% humidity because of the mini splits I have in there, and so it'll just be. They don't need a whole lot. I did when I bred them before. I didn't need, they didn't need a whole lot of stimulation to be triggered. So, but I will dedicate one male to one female for both pairings. I want to know exactly who the parents are, who the sire of this litter is. And if I send you a picture, Michael, can you put this picture up? I will send you a picture of the female that gave birth.
You were muted there, Michael, but I assume you said yes.
So I'll send you that picture. This is the picture of the adult female that gave birth. And if you pop that up, you can see the variation in the animals. And just in the population I have, how radically different they are. And I'll send you one more picture of the other male I plan on pairing.
And I think that's the fun of it, right? When you get a nice clutch, or in this case, a litter of tons of different boas, we tend to always hold back the weird ones, the one that doesn't quite fit with everything. So sometimes it gets really complicated because we're all holding back the ones that don't look like what they're supposed to look like. So you're line breeding for really bizarre things sometimes.
So waiting on like I said, we have antiquated Wi-Fi out here in cow country. People think of Las Vegas being just a strip, and we're 18 miles north of the strip, and my neighbors have buffalo. They literally have bison next door in corrals. So while this downloads, did you get that picture yet of the female?
Yeah, I got the first one. I'll throw it up here.
And she is.
Yeah, with the variation in boas is definitely a lot. Because if I get this litter of Bahama boas, I think I'm gonna have to keep like almost every baby until they at least reach 2 or 3 to see the different variations. Because even like I have a pair from the same litter from Jeff Murray, and the male's like super dark and the female's like super light. But then people have like other ones that are even lighter than the female I have. So I'm just interested to see how they're gonna turn out. Like, I might send some to Cody Joe, but
how are those to get started on rodents?
It doesn't. Probably not that great. Although I was talking to Stephen Woodward about it, and he says honestly, like he just uses the anole juice on boiled pinkies, and that seems to get most of them going. Like only out of 30 babies, he was able to get most of them started on that, and then the rest he got started on like anoles. But for the most part, they weren't as bad as it seemed, and it even sounds like the Puerto Rican boas are going a lot easier now than they were in the previous generations. Like now they'll just take pinks for most of the time.
Okay, so that picture is the female that came in gravid. She's about 6 feet long. Then I just sent you another picture of the female that's going into the breeding pool this year. She's finally of size. And just in these 3 animals that we put up here, you can see the variety. And just how it really comes down to we just don't have a big enough sample size. We haven't been able to make the observations. Every time I see a picture, an in situ picture of a Russian burgeri in the wild, I take a screenshot, and just I have them all saved into a file, because I've seen some from Ecuador that look nothing like the ones I have, that look nothing like the ones Warren and Jeff have, and it's hard to establish a standard when something is so variable. And then back to what my friend was saying, he said, look, if you have the space and you don't need to move them, hang on to them, because you don't want to look at a picture of a snake you sold 5 years from now and go, holy cow, I wish I hadn't let that thing go. I have the luxury of space and the luxury of time to wait them out and see how they turn out. And literally to go out there and feed the 15, 16 babies, it takes me, I think, 4 minutes. They eat that well. I mean, I had every one of them took, frozen thawed, superheated pinks right off the bat the first week they were born, right after their first shed. Never had a problem getting them to start. They were really easy to start. So, I mean, so that, if you look at that at first glance, it screams Halloween phase Amazon tree boa. I mean, it does.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I saw it. I was like, oh, did he accidentally send me this?
Nope.
But yeah, that's super neat.
That's in the litter. That's in the litter. And I'll send you one more. I don't want to belabor the issue, but it's just been a lot of fun. And let me see what's a better picture.
And instead of doing morphs, it's almost better because you're getting just that variation with just the wild types.
None of them look the same. None of them look the same. It's just insane how varied they are. And let me see if I can get you one more.
Yeah, I think that's why that's why Amazon's all, like, in the last couple of years here have really caught on, I think, is because of the variation. Like, obviously you got the red calico stuff that everybody really wants.
Yep.
But then you got some of that, just the total variation. Like, you can breed just like a normal tiger to a Halloween and get 12 different babies that all look different. And you can still get red ones out of there.
Yes. And you don't know what they carry. I forget what the term is. Would it be polymorphic? I'm not sure. I have a nice tree of yellow tiger Amazons that I'll breed this year. And I can pretty much predict with some degree of certainty what they're going to look like. But with these, we just call them Ruschies because it's easier to pronounce. With these Ruschies, I have no clue. And it'd be arrogant of me to try to even say I have a clue because I just don't know what I'm going to get. The male that the female that you have there right now, that's the one that's going to be going into the rotation. The male I'm going to put with her is yellow and silver. So I have no idea what to expect. I'm just hoping I get something viable to play with. But I just want to be able to write more chapters on these by exposing them, and guys like Warren that are brilliant in their own mind with the scientific side of things, plus just being a good overall snake guy. He can add a whole different viewpoint to things than the non-degreed hobbyist like us would have. All we have is the education of observation and experience. I mean, that's a litter mate of the other one. They look, like I said, it's just crazy. So it's just going to be a fun ride. It really is. I kind of got caught up in what they are, what they could possibly be, and then I finally said, it's just not worth it. It's not like I've got them on Morph Market and misrepresenting them or doing anything like that. I just think they're cool, and that's good enough for me. We'll see what happens in about 5 years. But
yeah. So when was this litter? How old are they now?
3, coming on 3. And
most of these have darkened up like more like Ruschies, or have some of them kept this Amazon color? Obviously, that girl you're gonna have go is like it's Amazon-y, but it's like an Amazon Ruschi, right? But like it has that kind of muddier look that a Russian version has.
What's interesting also is the adults structurally look more like an Amazon basin. Their head and they have a basin-esque head, and they're much more girthy, even than like a northern emerald. They're if you know what I mean. They've got that basin stockiness to them that is different. That sets them apart again from. I mean, they dwarf Amazon tree boas. They just dwarf them. And I'm trying to find you one more shot of a recent shot of one. If anything, they've lost their vibrancy in those patterns. All the dorsal markings of that Halloween looking one, they're all gone. But that's what um, a lot of the Halloween Amazons that are not controversial, they lose a lot of that vibrancy in the first year or two of age as well. I was just trying to see if I have.
Yeah, like when some of those Halloween Amazons are born, they like as adults I think they're definitely underrated because like they're cooler than some people think. Because some people just like, oh, it's another garden phase, or it's as they used to be labeled, or sometimes still are,
Yes,
Cook's tree boas. Although the only person actually working with Cooks is Jeff Murray, and
yes,
those things are not Amazons, right?
no,
Like they're eating anoles, like they're super tiny babies. Same with
super
the,
tiny.
I
Yeah,
think he has
God bless him. I'm sure
Grenadensis as well.
that's a labor of love for him to get those things started, and some real dedication there. I probably couldn't do it. I can get lizards here, but and I've had to. If I need to, I will. But I have found lately that, and I've never been a big proponent of it, but then again, it's kind of going back. Sometimes you get so artsy fartsy, you get so creative that you forget the basics. Just getting these Zonata started, washing the pinky. I always go to my normal go to. Well, with the Ruschenbergs was superheat them and split brain them, and they pounded them. A couple of them, I had to paste some chick down on their heads to get them to start. But once I had to do that like once or twice. And to this day, I have two of that litter that have never fed from tongs. They only feed if you leave it overnight, which is fine too. As long as they're feeding, it's less work for me. Yeah, one last one.
I'd say I'm a big fan of that way of feeding. I wave it one or two times. They don't take it. Just toss it in the bin, leave it there, come back the next day. If they pick it up, man, that's the easiest way. Best way to feed a
Yeah,
large amount.
circling back, you just reminded me of one thing. With the little Sanzinia, the neonate Sanzinia, if you do progress to tong feeding, if you present the mouse to them, and I call it, if they ball python up and hide their head, just leave. Just leave. If they're either going to hit it or they don't. And if you try to persist, they just ball python up and you're done. All you're doing is stressing the snake out. Come back another day and try it again. I'm going to send you one last one here. This is a more recent pic of one of the babies. I really should have showed you about that technical, like a step-by-step. I started out trying to do that, but it just got to be too cumbersome with that many animals. I was going to take semi-annual pictures and keep them in a file of the same animal. But I think in the last picture I sent you, you can kind of see the body shape starting to change, where they're getting
It's
a little
like it is kind of like a Halloween Rushi kind of thing, but it definitely maybe that's just how maybe the species is more like mixed there in general, and that like you can see the Russian bergeri in it,
but
for sure.
And they very well may be hybrids, for lack of a better term. Assuming the taxonomical differences are enough to justify subspecies status. That's a conversation to be had by people way smarter than myself. But you can see on that last pic, once you put it up, that it's lost all the dorsal coloring. And by the time it's 5 foot long, I think you're just going to see a unicolored animal with darker saddles, which is what the adults are. Except for that crazy black and yellow one that you put the picture up. That's a unique animal for sure. It really is. But most of the adults are gorgeous, but they don't have a whole lot of busy patterns or busy colors. Time will tell. But I think in that last picture, you can already see that it's starting to look more like a basin, if you will, as far as that thickness that you just don't see in Amazons. I mean, it's getting thick. These things are already on adult mice, like retired breeder-sized mice, and they grow at a phenomenal growth rate. It's just blown my mind. It's been really fun to I've already been through three tub upgrades, and when they become adults, it's going to be really challenging. How the heck am I going to house them all? That's going to be difficult because I keep my adults in the cages. I keep those Sanzini in the 4x3x3. I just don't have a basking shelf in the corrallus cages. I take the basking shelf out, and I just use natural grape wood from old grapevines because I found that grape is for some reason very resistant to fungus and mold. It can, if you're doing a lot of misting and wetting, that it seems to take a long time for any type of. I tried using I forget the name of the wood, manzanita, and it grew mold in like a week. So that was a waste. So
Yeah, you guys have manzanita
like
out
crazy.
there in the desert, right?
Yeah, up
Okay.
at a certain elevation, probably about 3,000 feet, you start getting to the manzanita, juniper and manzanita. That's when you know you're in rosy boa territory, when you start getting up into the juniper belt. It's a little segue there, but I tried using manzanita because I love the cool, no bark, and that redwood, and it has a lot of fingers spreading out. It would be perfect, but it grows mold so fast. So I just use. Are you familiar with cholla wood? The cholla cactus. It's got a hard wood
Yeah,
with
yeah, I think so.
It's got like Swiss cheese holes in it. I
Yeah.
I harvest a lot of the dead cholla, strip the husk off it, and it's just this hard honeycombed wood. And I cut it into like 6-inch segments, and I use it for every species I produce. They crawl right in it, and the nice thing is you can just pull up the log and look at the snake and put it back down, and you don't really disturb them. And that doesn't grow mold either. So, and if things do grow mold here, I just stick it out in the desert sun for a day, and that takes care of that for about 6 months. But I know I've jumped around a little bit. You guys want to refocus me in on stuff that I skipped over?
Well, how about I'll jump.
Uh,
Sorry, do you mind if I go, Mike?
yeah,
I was actually
you go.
curious. So you've been talking about your building a while. I'd love for you to tell us maybe about how you what is your building? How big is that room? You talked about couple of rooms. I'm just curious if you can kind of go into how you keep all your animals. I like the idea. Like for me, I have one room and that's it, right? So I'm always curious. But you talk of a building, you talk of several different rooms. Do you mind just going through, give or take, how your setup is?
Yeah, bear with me for a second. I'll send you one more picture. I think I have one picture of the inside in total that will make it easier to explain my setup. So let me see here real quick.
And I think we never actually got your collection of what you're presently keeping. So obviously, Ruschies. Did I get that close?
Ruschenberger.
I was close.
Just say man. Yeah.
Ruschi.
I don't have a picture of the inside. So when we moved to this home, I needed a place to keep my snakes, and I told you that It was the third car portion of our 3-car garage. And when we moved, one of the requirements for me was I need a place for my snakes, whether that be in the garage or an outbuilding. So the house that we bought had 2 metal Connex storage buildings out back. So they had roll-up doors. One is 40 feet, one is 20 feet. But they're in line, but you can't walk between them. There's no doorway. They don't connect. You have to go through separate doors. So did some research and utilized, I will send you a picture of the finished product, but it's called EFIS, External Foam Insulation System. And basically what they do is they wrap that metal Connex building in 3 inches of styrofoam. They put a mesh over that, and then they shoot a synthetic stucco overlay. And then they put a roof on the top, an insulated roof. And I used, I think I could show you the finished product. I'll show you the before and after. Hold on just a moment. Okay, there we go. So yeah, I got a Pioneer mini split. I think I have 2 12,000 BTU air handlers inside. I have a modem connected to it because you can't get a Wi-Fi through the metal building. So just ran a modem from the house line, and I can control the whole thing from an app as far as the macro temperatures. So I just, like I said, I just set it from my phone, depending upon what the local weather conditions are. I try to keep the building around 80 degrees, 79 degrees if I can, and then heat the other cages, whether it be with radiant heat panels, which are all governed by herp stats. Radiant heat panels for the big cages, and a lot of stuff has no heat at all. My Zonata have no heat. They never have. My Baja rat snakes have no heat. They never have. Anything little, like if I have young Sanzinia, they're on heat tape. The back walls of the tubs are up against heat tape. And I set that heat tape zone at like 83. But they never seem to really want it. But it's there. Like again, like I said before, I have a hide on the heat side. I have a hide on the cold side. They choose. Rarely do they go to the heat at all. So I don't know if those pictures came through, but it turned out really well. It really did. And let's see if those come up.
Kind of looks.
So that's the before picture.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it kind of looks just like storage containers essentially. And you said 40 feet
Yep.
by 20 feet. Is that the size?
Well, the first one in the foreground is 20 foot long. Then the second with the two doors is 40 feet long.
And how deep?
They are 8 foot by 8 foot.
Okay.
And then you can see the finished product here. And
Yeah,
then
that looks really nice.
I had the roll-up doors taken out and framed with regular doors because there was way too much air getting through those doors. The gap was like 4 inches. There's no way I could modulate temperatures like that.
So just,
I'm not going to burn.
sorry about that. So just, so it's 8 feet wide, right? So this is, my brain's going, do you have cages on each side of the walls or only on one side?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's cramped.
So you do both sides then?
Yes.
And your cages are 2 feet deep or 3 feet deep?
3.
Oh, wow.
Now, I don't. Yeah, so it's about a body width and a half to walk down the center aisle, if you will. Yeah, I can't believe I don't. I'm sure I have it somewhere. It's just not in the folder I thought it was.
I'm sure you get nailed a few times by those Ruschies with that that small gap.
No, they've come close. Their aim and accuracy is astounding. They are not. I mean, they've knocked the phone out of my hand a dozen times taking pictures. Literally, hit the phone right out of my hands. And that's like
that's hilarious.
That's like at least a foot outside the cage. I have a video that I think I put it up on Facebook a couple of weeks ago of that orange-looking female that was showing the picture soaking. She just about hit the phone. I think she did hit the phone, but didn't hit it out of my hand. But the interesting thing about them is I put on my wife's long sleeve landscaping gloves, and if there's no heat signature, they don't bite. I can reach right in and pull them out. Now I've gotten bitten in the chest doing that, but they have never have clamped down on the glove, not one time. And 3 or 4 times I've had stuck sheds over the years with them, and I've had to soak them and then hand shed them. And they're really angry at first, and it's crazy. They just go limp. I mean, they literally just go limp to where you think you've done something. Well, what did I do? What? It's like an override, and they just give up. And then you finish shedding them, and you put them back in the cage, and they turn right around and try to nail you. But it's like a hog nose kind of thing where they just play dead. I don't know. It's crazy. But I've never been hit.
That's really interesting.
I've never been hit by an adult, and I haven't had too many occasions where I've had to hand shed. I try to, keep the humidity. If I keep the humidity in that building around 55, 60%, seems to be, enough for them. And I go through, for the animals that need humidity, I don't believe in misting systems. This is just a personal thing. I don't think anything in nature is static, whether it be temperatures, whether it be airflow, and whether it be humidity. I don't think a constant humid saturation is healthy, and it's not natural. Our place in Panama, we have a home there. I've herped there a ton, and you climb from the jungle floor, and you get 10 or 12 feet above the canopy. It's like being on a different planet. It's cooler, it's drier, it's better ventilated. And you come back down to the jungle floor and it's the dank, humid, environment. So I spray like once a week and let everybody, let them dry out towards the end of the week and then repeat and let it dry out. And I'll go sometimes, if I'm going to like those Ruschenbergeri, I'm not going to miss them all. I have not missed them this summer. I'm not going to, because I know that come October, November, I'm going to pair them together. So I'm going to utilize that. All of a sudden, this onset of a rainy season that they haven't had for 6 months is now upon them. And hopefully that will be a trigger to get them breeding. It worked the last time. I just was unfortunate enough to get the stillborns. But I'm hoping, especially now that I'm home more than I'm gone, that I can manage that whole process a little more tightly and get better results. Really looking forward.
So you're
Go ahead.
when did you so you obviously got that gravid female that had the cool babies and that, and then you've tried so how long when did you get your first ones, and were they just all imports, or did you get some from guys like Jeff or Warren?
It was all in one group as imports. And that was I can tell you, because I like to take pictures because it timestamps everything for me. I don't have to go back it up with an index card or something like that. And it makes it easier. And plus, you can go back and make comparisons. So I would have gotten them. Let's see here. So I got them probably May of 2022. And I showed you the picture of the female in the tub that dropped the litter? The kind of greenish looking female? Just a little while ago you put it up? I'm sending you a picture of what she looked like when she was gravid. And literally unrecognizable compared to her regular coloration and patterning. And you can see in the picture that this is pretty much, obviously it was her post-ovulation shed. And that was like the end of June. And then she dropped the litter in October.
And these are the females that go much, much darker when gravid. Is that correct?
She did. I've only had, like I said, she came gravid, so I had nothing to compare it to. Then she dropped the litter and resumed her normal adult coloration, if you will, which is basically, it's in that one picture, an olive green overall coloration. But when he puts the picture up, you'll see when she was gravid, she was a golden brown, like a bronze. And so I'm really, really looking forward to giving it a go again, just to see what the heck comes out of it. Because it will be very illuminating. It really will. I mean, you can see the...
Yeah, like she's way darker.
Yeah.
Like you can... Yeah. Like that's a very dark animal.
And she's actually pretty tractable compared to the rest. She's not bad. Not bad. So I'm really like I said, I'm really looking forward to trying this again, just to see. There's
have you bred Amazons in the past?
Yeah, I have some now.
And do they seem to keep get dark as they're gravid, like the Ruschies so far, or no?
Oh, you know what? I haven't bred enough Amazons to make that observation yet. Next fall will be my first real foray into that subspecies. I kind of started getting them out of curiosity after I got the Ruschenbergeri, because of all the comparisons being made. It's like, maybe I ought to pay more attention to what's going on over here. Of course, I've seen the red calicos and all those wicked cool morphs that are out there, but I just thought, I have the room, I have the tubs, might as well mess around with them and see what the difference is. I have gotten neonate Amazons, and compared to the neonate Ruschenbergeri, they're night and day. neonate Amazons are tiny. I find them much harder to get started than I did the Ruschenbergs. Much, much harder. These things were super, super easy, and maybe I got lucky right out of the gate and got spoiled, and Mother Nature's going to come back and slap me with reality the next time around. But they
Yeah,
were.
I remember Warren talked about his is either his most recent litter or like the first litter was like you, super simple and easy, but then his like second or third litter he had like I think one of them he couldn't even get any babies going like that for whatever reason. They didn't want chicks, they didn't want or chick scent on anything. They like none of them would eat. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if those were Trinidad or Costa Rican animals, but yeah, no, he had a hard time with the second and third litters
I want to say,
from what I recall from stuff.
yeah, and I do recall that too. We've had some conversations because I pick his brain as much as I can. Um, I want to say they were Trinidad's too, but I'm not for sure. But yeah, they had, like I said, I got really lucky out of the gate, and it may just be a matter of, I I, I had some. We'll switch real quick over to the California mountain king snakes. I just had a clutch of 5 eggs from the Laguna Mountain, the pulchra subspecies hatch. And dear Lord, they were so tiny. I mean, it's like, holy mackerel, these things are. The eggs were small. I knew they were going to be small, but I wasn't prepared for how they're like baby milk snake tiny. And I went out and washed 4 pinks and just gave them the pinky heads, and 3 out of 4 ate the first time at 5 days old. So I got, maybe these aren't going to be as tough. Then I've got some animals from the Greenhorn Mountains that hatched, right, that haven't shed yet. They're twice the size of the Laguna Mountain animals, and I don't really see any issues. I've never had any problem. That's why I like the Zonata is they are generally really, really easy to start on mice. Really easy compared to gray bands or Arizona, the Arizona mountain king snakes. A lot of the ones that want lizards, for some reason, these trigger onto mice real easy. It doesn't take a whole lot of work. I've had a couple over the years, and I'm a big proponent of not waiting too long to intervene. I'll jump in there if they're not eating on their own within a couple of weeks. I'll give them a segment of mouse tail, get them started, try to jumpstart the motor. I don't, that there's a fine line between waiting too long and dead, and I have no problem stepping in and assist feeding for a few weeks until they get started themselves. It's worth the effort. I think I may have lost you guys.
Nope, still here. I just wasn't sure if you were still going to go. So,
I'm sorry.
No worries, Bill. So, I'd still love to know what else is in your collection. Like, I keep hearing new species. Any basins, any emeralds, anything else that you haven't talked about?
Nope. Loxoscemus. I have a Loxoscemus project.
And
The New World burrowing pythons. Again, not a common a snake to keep. Not a commonly bred. There's a guy in Arizona, I forget his name, who's done real well with them. But they have a reputation of being difficult to breed in captivity, so that's my nectar. I'm going to try. And
yeah,
one thing
I think Stan Grumbach in Texas has done pretty well. He got some offspring in the 90s from Houston Zoo and whatnot, and they had to wait. From what I recall, they had to wait like 10 years until they bred for the first time. Please continue, Bill. Sorry.
They grow like redwood trees. They are ravenous feeders. I mean, just you can't make them mean. They're cool. They're like the coolest snakes I have that you never see. They're totally fossorial. They take nothing to care for, but they grow like a redwood tree. I don't know if I'll age out before these things are sexually mature. Because I have found DORs in Costa Rica of big adults. I mean, these things were over 4 foot long, huge. And I'm looking at this little tub of mine. I got 1.3, and maybe I'll give them to my son and my will by the time they're of age to be sexually mature, because they don't seem to grow much at all. but that's, and then I have the Baja rat snakes. I have a nice group of those. Those are just the most naturally docile snake on the planet. And then I have a big group of the California Mountain Kings. I have all the Ruschenbergs. I have the Hortulanas and quite a few Sanzinia. And trying to think of what else. I've got Texas. I got New Mexico milk snakes and Texas milk snakes. And then I just got a trio of milk snakes in from Missouri. Because I'm kind of like in a little...
Oh, so you have Selenops?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, I've always had a love affair since I found my first California Mountain King snake when I was a junior in junior high, when I lived in California. And I've over the last 6 or 7 years, reacquired my love affair with California Mountain King snakes. I'd forgotten how much I enjoy them, and they're just a pleasure to work with. I mean, they're, like I said, they're undemanding in their care parameters. They're really easy to breed, and the babies are usually pretty darn easy to start on pinks. What more can you ask for? And they're gorgeous.
Yeah, they are very nice.
Yeah, it seems like
Go for it, Mike.
The Zonata and the Algama have definitely taken off the last couple of years. Like, they've been around, but it seems like guys like maybe Trumbauer and that starting to talk about them, and a few more people having them. They've kind of definitely exploded a bit.
I have a male. I'm waiting on a female. It was a karma bro deal, if you will, for a pair of Baja rat snakes. So at the time, the guy only had the lone male. So I'm due a female, but I don't think it's going to be this year, and that's okay. I'm a big proponent in those kind of things. I like trades. I like karma deals. When money starts getting involved, things get, obviously a little different, and there's more anxiety when you're the seller, I think, when there's cash involved. But when you do a mutually beneficial trade, it's a win-win for both parties. It's a great deal, and
for sure.
But the only difficult thing with that now is that I'm not adding any more animals. I'm not adding any more projects. I'm done. If anything, it will be a gradual decline. I've got other things I want to do. We are lucky that our youngest boy still lives with us, so we have an indentured servant to watch our dogs so we can travel. But, they're there. Yeah.
Yeah, here's a Loxocemus. Dom, you've probably seen these back in the day. But yeah, no, apparently from what Stan Grumbach was saying back in a NPR episode from a long time ago, they would, after 10, 15 years, they get about like 3, 4, like they get a good size. People thought they were small, but then they get actually like pretty big, and then they have like 3 massive babies at like 15 years old. They take forever to settle in, but they're like super neat, bulletproof.
And they're super iridescent. They're a great snake to bring to like an elementary school for show and tell, because they're strong. They're but they don't bite ever. They don't. Hold on, I lost you.
We still see you. We can hear you.
Oh, we still have you.
They don't bite. They don't vent or void. They're just effortless. I just wish they grew faster. I have them in a rack. I only have one rack. I'm not a big proponent of rack systems, but most of the animals I keep don't lend themselves well to a rack. When you have a
We might have lost him. Yeah, we did lose him.
That's all right. I'll just tell him to come
See
back
if we can
in.
get him back in. I find it... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you
okay.
Keep going.
I was going to say, I find it really interesting to talk to him, to just hear how things are, because I'm thinking about, like, I'm obviously a little bit, let's say 2 decades above you, and he's 2 decades above me, right? And when I think of these kind of things, I'm like, okay, I have about 50, 60 animals in my care, and maybe, the babies fluctuate up and down. And all I'm thinking is, as I get closer to retirement, his age, I would assume that my animal level would get like really, really high. There you go. Hi, Bill. Welcome back. So I was just saying that we're all like 20 years in between. And I can see myself as like, I've got 50 or 60 animals, seeing myself getting to the age of 60. I could see myself going in the 200, 300 animals. unlimited time. I can finally keep everything I want. And it's funny because you're at the point where you're thinking nothing comes in. I'm slowly going to decrease and decrease. And I feel like I'd be going the opposite. I'd be like, all of a sudden,
Yeah.
I've got all the time in the world. I
Yeah.
can do it all.
No, there's a we want to I want to do a lot of traveling. Fishing is my other passion, and I want to be able to do more of that. And the more stuff you have, the more of a burden it is on yourself or someone else when you leave. And living here in Vegas, I am in perpetual fear of a power outage in the summertime. Wintertime, as we know, they can handle a dip in the temps a lot more than they can handle 117 degrees outside and you have no air conditioning. And it weighs on you. At least it weighs on me. And I'll never not have animals, but I don't think going forward within 10 years I'll have the complexity, or I won't have the variety that I have now. I'll just have my Sanzinia probably till I leave, and a few other things. But right now the status quo is just enough. It really is just enough. Unless I produce something that is just really a screamer of some wicked derivative, I'm not interested in. I'll get things started. I'll sex them as best I can. These Zonata are going to be very difficult for me. My eyes suck, and I'm really bad at popping animals. I'll probably have to bring in some outside help for that. Fortunately, I got a couple of buddies in the valley here who are super smart snake men, smarter than me, that will help me. Best. I did have one Sanzinia come back, sold a pair, and ended up being 2 males out of like 60 some odd. I missed one, so that's pretty good. But I was glad to get him back because I needed him. Actually, turned out I was really proud. He turned out to be gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So, and his father, my foundation male, I think he's done. I think he's aged out of the betting market. I don't think he's going to be. I'll keep him. I'll keep feeding him, but I don't think he's producing semen anymore. He's just going to go into that retired stud farm sector of the building. And now I've got his son coming up, and I've been trying to breed high yellow westerns and focusing on, because most of them turn out to be pretty blasé as adults. They're overall beige desert brown colored animals, but it has proven to be inheritable. Glenn Brooks in the Sacramento area, California, bought a pair of my F1 kind of high yellow offspring, and he's produced some spectacular. He's really taken that and ridden with it and produced some, really prideful looking high yellow animals. So it is something that can be done. It's just a matter of numbers and having enough animals with which to establish a population, handpick the ones you think are different, and then see if it's an inheritable trait. But you're looking at 6 years, and when you're 66, 6 years puts you at 72. Then it puts you at 78. You don't start thinking about your own mortality, but you have to be realistic.
What generation are you in with
really.
your own Sanzinia now? Seeing how long you've been doing it, are you at F3? F4, damn.
Oh, 4. Yeah. And this female that's going to drop, I would be sorely tempted to hang on to at least a female, but I probably won't. And there's probably a lot of people around the country, whoever watches this, clapping their hands right now, because there's a lot of guys out there stuck with lone males right now. And I have to be realistic. I've got a screamer pair of, they're now 3-year-old holdbacks, and that'll be enough going forward. Again, unless something just, if I produce something that's just so crazy, like 90% white, or who knows, I might be tempted, but I have to be realistic, and I have other things I want to do. And my wife has been super patient with me over all these years. And I know when I'm at my saturation point, and I'm there, and I'm happy with it.
For sure.
I really am. I got plenty of stuff to play with these Ruschenbergs, and seeing what proves out, or not proves out, because do that yet, but what the results are, and throw it out there, open for discussion. Everyone has opinions, and that's great, and that's how you learn. And maybe I'll live long enough to get those Loxies to breed. I'd love to get a crack at those. Those are kind of like the next Calabar boring python for me. I want to be able to figure them out, but they're growing at such a slow rate. I don't know if I could wait them out. Big difference. And then the litter of Intergrade or Ruschenbergs or whatever the heck they are that are now 3 years old, 3 years from now, I'll be pairing those. So that will be a really cool thing to do. Whether I pair brother to sister or breed them back to one of the imported animals, I don't know yet. But at least it'll be really fun to have the options. You know how it is. You go out to your building or your room or whatever it is, and it's when you walk in there and everything's clean and tight and everybody's fed. It's just such a cool feeling. Hatching out these Zonata last week. I run in and I always have, I tell my wife, I'm bringing in the snake. I have to let her know I can't surprise her. And it's the true fountain of youth. I'm 13 years old again. Every time I find one or every time I hatch one out, when that feeling goes away, I'll know I'm done. I had a good year in the field this year, herping with the Zonata, and you flip a rock and you're dog tired. You swear to God you can't make it up another hillside, and you flip one of those things, and I'm teleported back to 1975. And it's the truth. That's the reason I go to the gym and stay in shape, so I can climb mountains and flip rocks and try as best I can. And you get out there and it's just, you're teleported to a different plane, and it's peaceful and quiet, and you see all kinds of. I always tell my wife about the incidental wildlife I see. This past spring I saw the first wild boar I've ever seen in my life, and this thing was massive, but it was thrilling to see it. A golden eagle flew by me. It was just really, really neat stuff. So part of the reason I like doing the field herping is it keeps me active. The more animals you have, the bigger the boat anchor around your neck, whereas you can't. So I'm trying to discipline myself to thin the herd, focus it on the things enough just to keep the Jones happy, keep me happy, and share the wealth a little bit down the road. I
Yeah,
think.
for sure. It's I have a feeling when I get, even though I'm only 23 now, when I hit that older stage of herpetoculture, like even right now, I feel only having 30 animals or so. I'm at like my limit because I work 60 hours a week trying to make as much as I can. So that my limited time
Well, you
is
owe it to the
not so
animal.
much. Like it's enough, but like as soon as I get like one lizard or something, you realize this is like even just one lizard on top of 30 snakes. That's 30 snakes are easy because you walk in the room for 10 minutes every day. You see what needs to go. You water change
Yep.
them 3 times a week and feed them one day. But
Yep.
it's that other thing that just knocks you off, and then it kind of messes up your balance almost of your peace of mind when you walk in that room.
But also, I think you owe it to the animals too. If you don't have the proper amount of time or the willingness to devote to a large collection, to where you're like, oh, you pull out a drawer or a tub, you're like, crap, I forgot about you. Then you're not doing the animals, not doing right by the animals. And I've never been at that point. I don't. It's easy to get there. The biggest change that I've seen that you guys are reaping the benefits of is all the information. I mean, just look at what we're doing right now. It's like three guys sitting around a pub, just telling war stories, if you will. And, when I came up there, I mean, I remember the biggest thing was Reptiles and Amphibian magazine. That was a huge uh, innovation at the time. Actually people putting our affliction to print, on paper. And then, uh, kingsnake.com came around, and that was the big marketplace and the big place. Of course, that's where all the sniping started too. I mean, it's just human nature. But then, like the field herping forum, that was, some of the best friends to this day that I have in my life, I met on the field herping forum. Guys that saw my posts and reached out and said, hey, I'm planning a trip to Tucson or Central California. Do you think you could take me out? Yeah, and we just hit it off on all cylinders on other aspects of of our life and our philosophies. But my closest friends were made through that thread of reptiles, but became deeper friendships on other levels because of the people they are. So you guys are very fortunate to have all this stuff, especially 23 years old. Holy mackerel! You got and the species that are available in the hobby now that are being propagated. Coming up, everything was an import, and you had to deal with those expected mortality rates, which to this day are still brutal. And if you're buying imports, you have to do that with a wide open, you know, expectations of failure, because you're just dealing with a loaded gun. You don't know what you're getting. You gotta be careful. But there's so much being produced now, especially since COVID crashed everything. Now, a smart guy going and buy stuff up now because it's cheap, because the market will swing again. It has before. And I've been around long enough to see. I remember when Dumeral's boas were like $35 a piece because there were so many of them. They had big litters and no one wanted them. So they went to nothing, maybe $50. I think now they're quite pricey. I'm not into them anymore, but I think they're quite pricey, and they'll
Yeah, I
they'll
think they
probably
went up
crash
to
again. So it's kind of like playing.
Jason Exotics or something. I think he put him up to 700-800 bucks or something, because he which
Oh, sure.
turned out to work, because like sometimes when you price an animal at 200 or 300 bucks, but then you start pricing at 800, for some reason people think it's the new thing and that they need to get it. So for some reason when he did that, it was a
Yeah,
smart decision,
yeah.
because people bought them. They just so it was kind of smart on him
Well,
for that. But yeah,
the bottom line, the true value of anything in this world is what someone else is willing to pay for it, right? And you can put a price on anything if if you think it's a fair price and an honest price. Um, Sit on it, but be willing to not move it if you don't get your price. There's a lot of guys that do that. They will not budge from their pricing, and that's everybody's own prerogative.
yeah, for sure. On onto that Zonata stuff. Do you want to quickly go into how you maybe keep the Zonata and the Bajas? Like, is it similar to each other? Obviously, you keep them ambient, but like, what are you keeping them? How do you have the cages set up, and what are some things you've kind of learned with them?
Well, so the Bajas are just I have one pair that are in the same size cage as the Sanzinia, the 4 foot by 3 by 3, which is overkill. But that's always they're on the ground floor. I made like a faux cliff face out of stacked. Uh, it's natural rock, if you will, but it kind of to try to replicate like a cut in the desert, a cliff face of different levels, and they can ascend all the way up, kind of like people keep Uromastics, where the higher they get, the closer to the heat panel they are. But I hardly ever have the heat panel on. Literally, they're at room temperature on the ground floor of my building, 80 degrees year round. Now it'll dip down in the wintertime, maybe in the low 70s, but I don't move them. I don't touch them. I feed them the same, and I get a good clutch of eggs every year. I do nothing special. I wish I could, wax poetic about something insight that I have, but I don't do anything special for them. I don't do anything. I just leave them be. And one thing that's funny is the male fasts the entire time the females grab it. He will not eat. And the minute she lays her eggs and starts eating again, he starts eating.
So
So that, and there's not I just keep in tubs. Hold on, one of my bulldogs got in here. Go on. Yeah. Though like I said, I don't like racks, and I don't, but they are well suited for racks, and they're not very big, so it's an easy way. The big thing with them is locality. People want to know where they came from, and there is a big difference. And even though they're aside from the agalma, there's been a recent taxonomic change. Robert Hansen just put out this phenomenal brand new California reptiles and amphibians field guide, and he pretty much just collapsed all the different subspecies into two. And go on, hold on a second. Go on. Go on. So, but anyhow, if you have animals from the Laguna Mountains, you got to keep them separate from the Greenhorn Mountains, keep them separate from San Bernardino Mountains. It's a more logical way to do so. So you don't, so what you're representing is true. And right now I'm just working with, I have the one Agama waiting on that female to come. And then I've got quite a few animals from the Greenhorn Mountains, which are kind of a integrated. You guys are from Canada, so you wouldn't know, but you have the main Sierra Nevadas in California. Then right above Bakersfield, you have the Greenhorn Mountains, and then you connect over to the Tehachapi Mountains, and then you go east to other San Gabriel Mountains. Then you end up in the Laguna Mountains at the southern end of California. Then they don't show up again until the Sierra Juarez in Mexico. That's where the Agamas come from. So I have them in racks, like I was telling it at the onset, trying to keep localities in the same stack. They're all the same animals. Whether I collected them, I have dates of when and where I collected them. I even drop a pin on Google Maps on every animal I found. And or if I acquired them in trade from karma deals from buddies, the same information, because they're keeping the same data. But it's important to people that if you want to market them, you know where they're from. And there's a lot of difference between the, if you want to call it localities, but like the animals from the Greenhorn Mountains that I primarily have, I think I have maybe 2.12 right now, 2.12 of varying ages, not all adults. But they can get 36 inches long. They're huge for a Zonata. I mean, big animals. And the ones in the Lagunas, I mean, they're tiny, maybe 24 inches, 24 inches max. They're the same animal, but completely different sizes and body shape. So I just try to keep them straight. And they have no heat. Like I said, the ambience in the room are pretty colubrid friendly. They don't need, they have a damp hide and a dry hide, like I was saying. I put the cholla logs in there. They want to curl up in those. And other than that, it's just, at an appropriate size. And I don't subscribe also to a routinized regular feeding schedule for my animals. I don't think personally that snakes evolved to be constantly digesting food. I think it's unnatural for a snake. I think a successful meal for a snake in the wild is a random event. And they expend calories either actively foraging or waiting. I have a pair of Madagascan ground boas, and the female's about 8 feet long and a massive animal. Could eat a small rabbit if I went that far, but XXL rats. She's in 6 inches of, maybe 8 inches of orchid bark. She will sit in the same spot with her nose barely sticking out of that orchid bark for weeks on end and never move. And then you reach in there with a big rat and it's like a bomb went off in the cage. She just explodes onto it. But my point being that I think a lot of adult mortality in snakes comes from us deciding for whatever reason that X species of snake needs to eat every 7 days. Who said so? It just became part of the lore and we subscribed to it without any thought to, is this really healthy? So I will, like those ground boas probably eat every 4 to 6 weeks. That's about as frequent as they need to feed. And they're fine. They're absolutely fine. Younger animals I'll feed more because they're growing. But especially on adulthood, it's random. I may go 3 weeks with the Corrales, the Sanzinia. I may go a month and then feed them a medium rat. They're at the cage front wanting to eat on a nightly basis, but I'll give it to them. I've got animals, that are 16, 17 years old, that are still producing. And that's just my own philosophy. Things that I've come to this conclusion on my own and discussions with other learned guys kind of goes back to that. How do you house them so they can adequately digest? Temperature-wise, what facilitates digestion the best, but also do they constantly be needing to digest food? I don't think it's natural. I just don't. mean, you see snakes in the wild. I flipped Zonata that ate a lizard, clearly, because there's lizards everywhere. This thing was so distended, it couldn't even move. But you try to feed a snake in captivity that same ratio of prey, and I'll bet you often you're
So
going to get a
have
regurg,
you had to deal with
right?
regurges with the Bajas or the Sonata, or in Vegas you seem to be okay with
No,
that?
no, no, I haven't. There are some guys that have had regurg issues with
Yeah, our
Bajas,
guest last week has a few
and a
$1,000s worth
lot.
of them in his freezer still. But he lives in Corpus Christi,
Really?
which is super humid, so that also might be a part of the issue. Do
Yeah,
you keep a lot of ventilation in your cages or tubs with the Zonata and the Bajas?
I I, I have two big fans running, and then I have a big canister air filter in the middle of the room to filter the air because I use a lot of aspen. There's a lot of dust, and plus Vegas just has a lot of dust because of the arid conditions. But I think this is just my personal opinion that those problems with the Bajas come from people keeping them too hot. That's just like I said. They're at 78 to 82 degrees max. I leave them alone. I give them a very small water bowl. I let it go dry for a period of days and then give them a little bit more. And I feed them appropriate, either rat pups or, appropriate sized rodents. And, I feed the female a lot more than I do the male. Obviously, she just gave me 6 pristine eggs, so she got fed right up real fast. Uh, and I got an unrelated adult male from a friend. It's just screamer gorgeous, salmon pink. I can't wait to use him. But I've had no
Yeah.
issues. But I have sold animals to guys that ended up
Hmm.
having issues down the road. So it's got to be a husbandry thing. But I'm not smart
Yeah,
enough to tell
it
you.
sounds like people have similar issues
You
with
know,
subox. I keep 1.3 subox,
totally,
and I
totally.
haven't had an issue. But I also move them into 4 foot cages, and I just drilled the snot out of them so they have as much cross ventilation as possible. Because I've heard like some guys did that. Basically, when they keep
Right.
them in tubs, they just Swiss cheese the tub, and they seem to get rid of their issues of losing them when they get 4 or 5 years old. Like you got a clutch out of them, and then they seem to die from some sort of respiratory thing. So that's it's definitely seems like it's along the ventilation. Like you have fans going. I got a fan going. Like for some reason it, and this probably goes for other animals. Just other animals maybe are able to withstand the stagnant air a little better, but it probably over exaggerates it in some of these more slightly sensitive, even though
And
they're probably not that sensitive, honestly.
I always go back to if we just had a collection of Matchbox cars, we'd be a lot happier, right? We wouldn't have all these variables to deal with, but it wouldn't be as you know it, you know it wouldn't be as mentally stimulating. And I think to me that's as much of the addiction as anything else is. Aside from, like I said earlier, walking out there, nobody's got a problem. Everyone is eating. Everything's good. No, no stuff. All the things that you got to deal with. No stuck sheds. All the water bowls are clean, and you get like 30 minutes of bliss. Like, this is great. Then the next day you walk out there and everyone's pooped the bowls and trash the cages and all that kind of stuff. But it's the whole journey of the whole reason to breed snakes to begin, is I always look at it as if you're producing healthy, viable animals on a regular basis, it means that you've done everything else right, to get to that point. Sure, there's outliers. I'm sure you can abuse the crap out of garter snakes and you put them together and you're going to get babies. But some things are just, I danced around with getting into the Transpecos rats, the subox, quite a few times. I've always really, really, really liked them. But, I read about them and I did my homework, and it seems like they're a little bit more sensitive than I have the time to deal with. I know my limitations, and those are a little bit more sensitive. The Senecolas are a lot more sensitive than
Oh
the
yeah,
Baja rats
you
for
have a lot
sure.
of experience with the
Um,
Senecolas because that used to be like your thing over the Bajas was the
yeah,
Senecolas.
they predated the Bajas, that's for sure. Yeah, um, I've been fortunate to find a ton of them in the wild, and kept them for a long time and did really well. But I just kind of moved on. Um, nothing will replace the feeling of seeing one stretched out on the road. Nothing. Man, I can remember every one of them like it was yesterday. Just like I can remember every Zonata I've ever flipped within reason. But I'm just now really with the Zonata especially. I haven't been a big Kaluber guy for a long time, and when I had the Senecolas, I was really heavy focused on the Sanzinia and the Corrales. So I just didn't really feel like I felt like I was neglecting them, to be honest with you. So I had to make the big boy decision to, move them to someone who would appreciate them more and had more time for them. And I'm glad I did. I enjoyed having them, and I really do. But what I have, I'm really happy with. I've jumped in and out of a lot of things over the years, and you learn over time what's your wheelhouse and what isn't your wheelhouse. And where I'm at is like I said, is I've peaked as far as numbers, that's for sure. And over time there'll be a winnowing process, and I'll just move stuff out or not. I'm certainly not going to entertain any new projects at all.
So with the incubation and the babies of the Zonata and the boas, is there any like how hot do you keep? What temperatures do you kind of keep them at, and how do you? Okay,
They're in the same.
you just do the 80 degree.
They're in the they're in the same tub right now. My iPad is sitting on top of my little incubator. I've got a tub of Zonata eggs sitting next to a tub of Baja eggs.
Okay.
82 degrees, 82.5. And I know the gestation time, and I know when to start looking for pips. And then I'll typically wait 24 hours after the first one pips, and I'll pip the rest myself just to give them a little help. And yeah, I think so. My next, it's kind of a dead time right now, but yeah, the Bajas are due October 5th, and the last clutches of Zonata are due August 27th. Give or take a few days. And that's it. I'm just waiting on that Sanzinia to drop. Based on the ovulation picture, she's really not slated to drop till like the end of August, or even and I have to check the dates, but it's going to be a long wait, I'll tell you. It really is. I'm ready for her to drop now, but the longer she goes, the better the odds are going to be that it's a good viable litter. And I'll be, my friends already know I'm going to be real hard to live with when I get this litter. I can promise you that right now. And that's why I still love this game, because I still get a thrill out of that. She is in the cage right when I open the door, so it seems like I'm just OCDing over this animal, but I can't help but not see her when I walk in the door. So I'm a little bit more in tune with her progress than I am like the Western Sanzinia that's gravid right next to her. I barely even look at. One of these days I'm going to walk out there. There's going to be babies crawling around, but I'm not, aside from offering her food, I'm not giving her, and water, I'm not giving her the time of day, because this one has eluded me for 3 years. I finally think this is the time she's going to turn the corner, and I'm all in.
Yeah, they're definitely a beautiful snake, and definitely have our fingers crossed for you, because when they kick you in the nuts a lot of the time, and then when they finally produce, it'll be definitely an elation for sure.
Well, so many, and I know this is running long. So many people, but I heard stories. When I first got into them and had success, that people just gave up. They couldn't figure them out, and they just gave up. Fortunately, a few of us got lucky enough to be successful and to be able to compare notes, i.e., the modern day way of sharing information, that we could start identifying and establishing some protocols to have better results going forward. And helping each other out, and what'd you do, what you didn't do, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and over time you get a little Bible established that at least you have a schematic of what to use to give yourself a good shot. If I can help anybody, do that, I'm happy to share. And all I can share is what's worked for me and what hasn't worked for me, and it's probably 70-30 in the inverse. You don't. If it was
Yeah,
easy, we
for
wouldn't be
sure.
doing this, I guess.
I think we should close it out with one last question here. Why don't you tell us a good herp story from either collecting Zonata or uh, Centicolis? Like one that just comes to mind of like a cool story of maybe an animal that you
Well, I
have
can tell
currently.
you one. I can tell you. How about one in which I did everything you're not supposed to do? As a little. So in my job, I travel a lot. Not so much now. I'm kind of semi-retired slash consulting, if you will, but for my same company. But in my heyday, I traveled a lot, and I would time a lot of my sales trips in prime herping season to that. My territory is California, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. So I got to do a lot of herping on the dime, if you will. One day I was in Bakersfield, California. I sell equipment to the railroads, construction equipment, and typically their day starts early, like 5 a.m. So my meeting for the day was done around 10 a.m. I thought, crap, I've got a whole day. I'll just run up into the Greenhorns and do some flipping. The Greenhorn Mountains being my spots are an hour from Bakersfield. Okay. So I jet off into the mountains in my pickup. I tell no one where I'm going. There is no cell phone reception. I'm 40 miles off a paved road. And when you're flipping for Zonata, you're just going up hillside, pretty steep inclines from one granite outcrop to the next. And you're flipping around the base for the rocks that have fractured over time. And you're shining a flashlight into cracks looking for the animals. And at one particular outcrop, I took a step back. And I don't know if I think I stepped back on a platter that tilted. Anyhow, I rolled backwards, rolled down the hill, and came out of the roll face first into a rock. And it was a mess. It was a mess. So I managed to get myself out of there. I drove back into Bakersfield. Long story short, I had a brain bleed, a big hematoma on the side of my head. My wife had to come meet me in the hospital. They kept me overnight. And the sickest thing about it is I had a snake bag held to my head, walked to my truck, also had a deep, deep bruise on my hip bone or something. And I'm holding this snake bag on my head and I'm looking up at that outcropping, and part of me wanted to keep on going because I knew my window of opportunity in May was closing. And I thought, I can still go a little bit longer, but the takeaway is from that day forward, whenever I go herping, I send my wife a Google Maps pin. This is where I'm going to be. This is where my truck's going to be. If you don't hear from me by whatever time of the day I cite to her, this is where you start looking for me, kind of thing. So it's hard to give you one great story because you bust your ass all day. Like I was out there last April with a dear friend, and he's right with me, and I flip 2 yearling females. He gets nothing, and you feel bad. And this is probably the best story. So I go back to that same outcrop in May, keeping in mind this is also a Northern Pacific diamondback hibernaculum. There are crotalus everywhere. I'm walking through the bushes with my backpack, swinging it in front of my legs just to make a lot of noise to get to the rocks. So I get up. It's a big rock. It's 4x4 and about 8 inches thick, and it's rock on rock, which is kind of unusual. But I get down under my hands and knees with a flashlight, and there's a bomber underneath this rock. And it's the same rock that last year I flipped a big female under. But the rock is so big, I knew I couldn't lift it in one grab. So before I lifted it, I went and got another small rock. I made one pull, kicked the rock underneath it so I wouldn't crush the animal by setting the rock back down. Then made another pull and got the animal out. So flash forward to this year, same rock. I get down, there's that bomber underneath the rock, and the adrenaline just goes nuts. And there's right next to the rock is the same rock I used a year before to push under the rock. So I did that. I got the animal. I'm stoked. I go on. It's a great ridge line. I mean, it's west-facing ridge. It gets really good exposure all day. And I'm coming back to my truck about an hour and a half later. I just went back over there, that same rock, get down on my hands and knees, and there's another bomber female stretched out right underneath the lip of the rock. Didn't even have to lift it, just picked her up. So that was the most epic herping moment I think that in my life is, and then I posted that picture of them sitting on a scale. One of them's like 260 grams or something like that. It's just huge. And the first one was grabbing. That's the 6 eggs that are sitting in the box right now.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I didn't even realize. Yeah, that's super cool.
And what really kind of sucks is like I told you, I'm a big believer in karma deals, and a really good friend of mine. I won't mention him because I don't have his permission, so I'm not going to do that. Super savvy field herper, super savvy. I mean, really good. He was over, and I thought I was male heavy on these greenhorn Zonata. So I gifted him one. Turns out every other animal I have is female. I'm not sure if I even have an adult male right now for next year. I may have to borrow that one back. But the point of it is, it wasn't that big a deal to help him out, because he's helped me out in the past too on other things, and I call it a karma deal. It all comes out in the wash, and so yeah, those animals I could see keeping until. I mean, there's a guy right now that wants to buy some Zonata from me in Colorado. I think he's like 78 years old, and I'm kind of I'm thinking I don't see myself at 78 buying snakes from somebody. I just don't. But to each his own. He's like a grandpa. Well, I should be too, but I'm not. So I could see myself keeping these. They'll be the last to go because they're just so cool and so easy. I'd get rid of the Sanzinia probably before the Zonata because I have a romance with them from such a young age. 12, 13 years old. The first one I found, I was out of gas because I was, we were hiking and it came out from between my legs underneath the rock I was sitting on. And I could remember that like it was yesterday. But I couldn't tell you where I left my car keys today. That kind of thing. It's funny how, some memories are just, I can remember every one I found. Literally. I don't need any prompts or pictures or anything. I can remember every one I found. And I'm already looking forward to next May. April, I went too early. Did get the 2 young ones, but May's the month. May, and I'm already making plans. And it's 5 hours from my house. So it's the fountain of youth for me. It really is.
Wow.
No.
So I run you guys
That's
long.
all right. All of ours so far have gone 2 to 2.5 hours, so that's not bad at all, honestly.
Okay. Told you, I start rambling, then it's your job.
No, that was awesome. That was great.
Bill, a huge thank you. Really, really appreciate your wealth of knowledge, the information, the stories. I personally love bringing on people that have had so much experience. I think it's just amazing to hear the past and how you are doing now and everything you've done. I think, again, a million thank you. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, is there anywhere where you'd like to send them to, either email or Facebook or
They could just
William
find me
Hughes?
on Facebook Messenger. Bill Hughes, I have a Desert Okie Reptiles, but I never go there. So just Bill Hughes, Las Vegas, and if you see it, if my profile comes up with a bunch of snake pics, it's the same guy. Yeah, and if anyone wants to chat, I can help. If hopefully the 3 of us can stay in touch. I feel like I've made 2 new friends today, and And you guys come down from
Oh,
For
Canada
sure.
someday.
Or
I'll
you
take
can
you
come
out.
up here. I can show you some rubber boas and and gopher snakes and stuff.
You know, I never get tired of seeing it. I've found a lot of rubber boas. You know, that's a snake that I would love to keep, but I just know it's
Yeah,
not
for
fair to them
sure.
in Vegas.
Uh,
Just too hot.
Bill, we're
It's
gonna
just too darn hot.
have you just stay on the line for a bit. Once we close out, we gotta make sure you upload. But yeah, it was awesome. It was great talking to you, and I look forward to
All right.
talking to you soon.
Yeah, I'll take care.
No, don't hang up. Just stay on
Wait, you don't
No,
want me
because
to hang up
just
your
then?
stay on the
internet's a
line.
little bit slower and the uploading is going to take a couple of minutes. Let me just close it out. So, everybody, a huge thank you. If
Yeah.
you want to reach out to Michael or chat or see anything from him, it's Michael Gillon on Facebook. For Instagram, Reptile Rejects. Thanks for loading on. And for myself, it's Dominic Calvin on Facebook or domsreptiles.com or domsreptiles on Instagram. To everybody, good evening, and thank you for logging on. Have a good day, guys.
Bye bye.